European invasion of the Americas began in 1492. There was a clear technological disparity between the two cultures and societies. And in the past, this technological disparity was used to explain the success of the European invasion. Technologically, Europeans had metal. This metal gave them harder tools, better weapons, better defenses. They also had gunpowder, a technology they learned from the Chinese and had used it for fireworks. Europeans did what they did best, learned how to use it to kill. And so this seems a very easy explanation of how Europeans, a very small number of Europeans, were able to conquer and take over the Americas. They had guns. Unfortunately, that is an inaccurate and unconvincing argument because Europeans around the same time as 1492 showed up in Africa, they showed up in Asia, and were not successful at subjugating the Africans or the Asians, right? They simply were not. Small numbers of Europeans had, say, along the coastline of Africa and say along the coastline of Asia. And for example, in a place like Japan, where the Japanese didn't want them all together, the Japanese just drove them out. So the metal and the gunpowder did not provide an adequate tool for empire building. Yet in the Americas, a small number of Europeans were able to conquer dramatically with guns. The story begins with Columbus in 1492, right? 1492, Columbus sails the ocean blue. He had this bright idea to go east and was convinced that the earth was small enough that he could go east and reach Asia to sustain and continue the European luxury. In one sense, he got lucky and landed in the Americas. He landed in what he called the Indies. But in another sense, he got incredibly unlucky because he never found his trade route that he wanted. And by the end of his life, he was very bitter and distraught because he was a failure. But he did make multiple voyages to the Americas and back, right? 1492, 1493, 1502, 1498. He did what other Europeans had not been able to do. He went back and forth looking for, but he kept running into land and he could not find his trade route. Each time he wrote back and told Isabella of Spain that he had found the Indies, right? And he had found Indians and convinced her to finance multiple trips. But eventually, the Spanish crown did not want to finance any more of Columbus. And so they set up a base on Cuba, and from Cuba, tried to explore more of the Americas. But in Columbus's journals, we know what first contact was like. So, for example, he said, as I saw that they were very friendly to us and perceived that they could be much more easily converted to our holy faith by gentle means than by force, I presented them with some red caps and strings of beads to wear upon their necks, and many other trifles of small value, wherewith they were much delighted and became wonderfully attached to us. Afterwards, they came swimming to the boat, bringing carrots, balls of cotton thread, javelins, and many other things, which they exchanged for articles we gave them, such as glass beads and hawk bells, which trade was carried on with utmost goodwill. But they seemed, on the whole, to me, to be a very poor people. They all go completely naked, even the women, though I saw but one girl. All whom I saw were young, not above 30 years of age, well made, with fine shapes and faces, their hair short and coarse like that of a horse's tail, combed toward the forehead, except a small portion which they suffered to hang down behind and never cut. Some paint themselves with black, which makes them appear like those of the Canaries, neither black nor white. Others with white, others with red, and others with such colors as they can find. Some paint the face, and some the whole body. Others only the eyes, and others the nose. Weapons they have none, nor are acquainted with them. For I show them swords which they grasp by the blade, and cut themselves through ignorance. They have no iron, their javelins being without it, and nothing more than sticks. So some have fish bones and other things at the end. They are all of good size and stature, and handsomely formed. I saw some with scars and wounds upon their bodies, and demanded by signs of them. They answered me in the same way, that there came people from the other islands in the neighborhood who endeavored to make prisoners of them, and they defended themselves. So Columbus stumbled upon a group of people who were of a Stone Age technology, right? They had everything they needed to live a decent life. They weren't a sickly people, they were a healthy people, they were a friendly people, and Columbus thought that he could convert them to the holy faith by gentle means. But he also wrote, I thought then and still believe that these were from the continent. It appears to me that the people are ingenious and would be good servants, and I have the opinion that they would be very readily become Christians, as they appear to have no religion. So Columbus stumbled upon a people he believed were Indians, right, in the Indies, because that's where he thought he was. And he's writing back to Queen Isabella of Spain that he should continue to finance his trip, number one, because he can convert people in the name of God to the holy religion, Catholicism, Roman Catholicism, and uh, that as a bonus, he could find people that would make good servants, that he could bring them back to Spain. And he did bring a couple back to Spain to fill up. But unfortunately for Columbus, the rest of the people of the Americas were not as easily subdued. And he struggled for a long time to make any type of profit from the Cuban expedition. And so he was eventually uh, relieved of duty, brought back to Spain, stood trial, and thrown in prison. He was a failure. Others, though, continued to try to make a go of this expedition. One man, nearly 30 years later, Hernan Cortez, actually broke the rules and started driving on the continent itself. He was a young Spanish nobleman. He wanted to make his fortune in the Americas, and he got tired of not having much success on Cuba or Hispaniola. So he signed up for an expedition on the continent, and there charged of men and started exploring. He had 600 men with him, and he ran up against an Aztec empire. You know, an empire is a group of people who subjugate their neighbors, and the Aztecs were a group of people who had subjugated their neighbors, and through a series of wars, the Aztecs expanded their empire, and Cortez took advantage of this. So he took advantage of Native American diversity, that one group of Native Americans were being cruel to another group, and Cortez said, "Look, if you join with us, we'll liberate you, we'll help you, and with your war." Multiple groups of Native Americans believed him. So he marched on the largest city in the area, the capital of the Aztec Empire, Tenochtitlan, had about 200,000 inhabitants, and the Spanish were in awe. It sat in the middle of the lake, similar to Venice, and according to all accounts, it was clean, it was beautiful, it was not like anything they had ever seen. Through a variety of means, the Spanish started a conflict with the Aztecs, and with a limited number of men, right, 600 Europeans and a couple thousand Aztecs, they were able to take control of the Aztec Empire. So the big question then comes is, how did a single person, Cortez, and 600 men defeat an empire? Tenochtitlan itself was obviously a large and successful city governing over a wide territory. Well, first and foremost, you have to take into account that Native Americans themselves were not happy with Aztec rule. And so the Spanish were able to play one Native American group off against another. But there was a much bigger reason for this. And traditionally, the reason has been the Spanish had an arquebus, and it was a hefty weapon, firearm, long gun, somewhere around 20 pounds. It had to have a unipod to hold it up. It used a flow match, which meant that if you can see the man's hand, there's a cord which ignited the black powder in a pan. It's an incredibly inaccurate weapon. It was also unreliable in wet, damp conditions, but it made a loud bang. And when fired in volley, it can do a lot of damage to people standing 20, 30 yards away. On the other hand, Native Americans, like the Aztecs, had an atlatl, a throwing stick. This was a much more accurate weapon, and when there was enough ammunition, it could fire much quicker than a Spanish firearm. The Aztecs were known for their use of obsidian weapons. Obsidian is a volcanic glass, and when put on the end of a stick, it's quite sharp, and obsidian clubs can do a lot of damage. And so this becomes a matter of quantity over quality. Large numbers of Native Americans armed with traditional weapons, Stone Age weapons, atlatls, obsidian clubs, can quickly overcome a technologically superior small force. Okay? So the idea that guns and armor explain Spanish victory is inadequate. What really did it was the difference in lifestyle. Europeans lived in a northern hemisphere and lived in cottage. They spent a lot of time indoors, and not only spent a lot of time indoors, they spent a lot of time indoors with their animals. In the colder weather, they brought their domesticated animals inside. Well, when the animals came inside, so did diseases like typhus. Typhus is a disease that travels on rats and fleas and lice, and it's incredibly dangerous to human beings. There's salmonella, which most famously comes from chickens and eggs. And when it gets into the digestive tract, it causes human beings to dehydrate through a very painful and disgusting series of diarrhea. Probably the most dramatic of all of these is smallpox. smallpox was a skin disease and or at least manifests itself on the skin. And so we have woodcuts documenting Native Americans getting sick from smallpox. This is a picture from the 1960s. Uh, if you're listening to this, you're fortunate enough not to come across smallpox because of modern vaccinations that were able to eliminate smallpox as a disease not only in the United States but around the world. Right? Science transformed human life, but around 1400, Europeans and everybody else in the world were pretty ignorant about the causes of disease, the transmission mechanisms, and all the rest. So when Europeans came to the Americas, they brought pigs, they brought chickens, they brought cows, right? They brought everything with them, and riding on them were rats and fleas and lice, and coming with all of the animals and all of the humans were typhus and salmonella and smallpox. These diseases outpaced European armies. These diseases went from village to village into North America and South America faster than any European could travel with an army. And so these diseases decimated populations that were not used to them. Now, didn't happen in Africa, didn't happen in Asia, because by and large, Africans and Asians shared similar diseases. When humans evolved in Africa and in Europe and in Asia, and diseases hit them, they shared those diseases and developed immunities, or at least resistance to them. Because of the last glacial maximation, because the ice melted all the way, and when it ended, it nearly cut off the Americas. The American populations did not share typhus, salmonella, and smallpox. So that when in 1492, when Christopher Columbus sails the ocean blue and he arrives in America, these diseases come for the first time, and Native Americans have virtually no resistance. And millions upon millions of people die because these diseases sweep through, and there's really nothing Native American populations can do about it.